A locked bathroom door. No sign of forced entry. No strangers in the apartment. And yet, inside that small, enclosed space, a young woman was found dead with more than 20 stab wounds. How does something like that even happen? Was it suicide, as officials claimed? Or was something deeply wrong with that conclusion? Today, we're going to walk carefully, fact by fact, through what really happened inside that locked room, and why, more than a decade later, this case still refuses to rest. On the morning of January 26, 2011, Philadelphia was moving through another ordinary winter day. Inside a luxury apartment building in the Manayunk neighborhood, however, something extraordinary and deeply troubling was unfolding. Ellen Greenberg, a 27-year-old first-grade teacher, had not shown up for work. That alone was unusual. Ellen was known by colleagues and family as responsible, reliable, and deeply committed to her students. Ellen lived in the apartment with her fiancé, Sam Goldberg. According to his statements, the two had argued the night before, but by the next morning, things appeared calm. Goldberg left the apartment sometime before noon to go to the gym and run errands. When he returned later that afternoon, he said the apartment door was latched from the inside. After knocking and getting no response, he contacted building security and then 911. When the door was finally forced open, Ellen was found on the bathroom floor. The bathroom door itself was locked from the inside. Ellen was fully clothed. There was no sign of a struggle in the apartment, no overturned furniture, no broken items. But what authorities would soon document shocked nearly everyone involved. Ellen Greenberg had suffered 20 stab wounds, 10 to her neck and 10 to her torso. One of the wounds penetrated her spinal cord. Another passed through her chest. A kitchen knife, 8 inches long, was embedded in her chest when first responders arrived. Despite the graphic nature of the injuries, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office ultimately ruled Ellen's death a suicide. From the very beginning, that ruling raised serious questions. The autopsy, conducted by Assistant Medical Examiner Dr. Marlon Osborne, documented multiple wounds that experts later described as highly unusual for suicide. Some of the stab wounds were located at the back of Ellen's neck and head, areas that are physically difficult to reach with force, especially repeatedly. Toxicology reports showed that Ellen had prescription medications in her system, including Ambien, Klonopin, and Zoloft, all within therapeutic or low ranges. These medications became central to the suicide determination. The medical examiner suggested that Ellen may have been in a drug-induced state, impairing her judgment and pain perception. However, no lethal overdose was present, and none of the drugs alone, or in combination, were known to cause violent, self-inflicted stabbing. Equally troubling was the absence of hesitation wounds, which are commonly, but not always, present in stabbing suicides. Some wounds were described as deep, forceful, and inflicted at angles that raised concerns among independent forensic pathologists, later consulted by the family. The locked bathroom door became one of the most discussed aspects of the case. Authorities concluded that Ellen had locked herself inside before inflicting the wounds. No evidence of tampering with the lock was reported, but the locked door, rather than closing the case, intensified scrutiny. If this was a suicide, how did Ellen physically carry out such an act? And if it was not, how did someone else leave the room without unlocking the door? Adding to the confusion were early investigative decisions. The apartment was not immediately treated as a homicide scene. Ellen's electronic devices, including her computer, were accessed after her death, and the laptop was later found to have been wiped. Investigators said there was no indication the deletions were connected to the death, but the timing raised concerns for the family. Text messages recovered from Ellen's phone revealed that she had been experiencing anxiety and stress in the weeks leading up to her death. She had been seeing a psychiatrist and adjusting medications. However, family and friends consistently stated that Ellen was making future plans, including wedding arrangements, vacations, and classroom projects. There was no suicide note. Ellen's parents, Joshua and Sandy Greenberg, immediately rejected the suicide ruling. They began consulting independent forensic experts, including Dr. Cyril Wecht, a well-known forensic pathologist. Dr. Wecht publicly stated that, in his professional opinion, Ellen's death was a homicide, not a suicide. Other experts echoed similar concerns, particularly regarding the number, placement, and severity of the wounds. Over the years, the Greenberg family pursued legal action, requesting that the manner of death be changed from suicide to homicide or undetermined. In 2019, a Philadelphia judge ruled that the medical examiner's office must amend the death certificate to list the manner of death as undetermined, pending further review. However, that decision was later appealed, and legal battles continued. Throughout this process, no one else has been charged. No alternative suspect has been officially named. Sam Goldberg has never been charged with a crime and has consistently denied any involvement in Ellen's death. He has stated publicly that he loved Ellen and had no reason to harm her. What makes this case especially haunting is that it sits at the intersection of medicine, law, and human psychology. Locked room cases are rare, and when they happen, they tend to push the limits of what we think is physically and mentally possible. In Ellen's case, the official explanation requires accepting that a young woman, with no documented history of self-harm, inflicted over 20 stab wounds on herself, including to her own spinal cord, while alone in a locked bathroom. Supporters of the suicide ruling point to Ellen's anxiety, medication use, and the lack of evidence of another person in the apartment. Critics point to forensic inconsistencies, investigative missteps, and expert testimony that challenges the plausibility of the conclusion. Importantly, this case is not about sensationalism. It is about accountability and unanswered questions. The Greenberg family has repeatedly stated that they are not trying to accuse any specific individual without evidence. Their stated goal is clarity, an honest, thorough reassessment of the facts. As of today, Ellen Greenberg's death remains officially listed as a suicide in some records and undetermined in others, depending on jurisdictional interpretation. The debate continues in courtrooms, medical conferences, and public forums. What happened inside that locked bathroom has never been fully, conclusively explained in a way that satisfies all the evidence. And that is why this case endures. It forces us to confront uncomfortable realities about how deaths are classified, how assumptions can shape investigations, and how easily unanswered questions can be set aside when a case appears, at first glance, to be simple. The locked room did not solve the mystery. It sealed it. Cases like this remind us why asking careful questions matters, and why the truth is sometimes far more complex than the first explanation we're given. If you found this deep dive informative and important, take a moment to like the video. It helps more people discover stories that deserve attention. Subscribe to the channel for more thoroughly researched, fact-based explorations of real cases that still demand answers. And stay connected, because there are many more stories like this. Stories that aren't finished yet.